Hey now, Brawlers, it's time for another Board Game Brawl review with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com. Hey now, today we're going to take a look at Risk Star Wars Edition, or Star Wars Risk, or however you want to pronounce that. This is nominally a version of Risk set in the Star Wars universe. Now, actually, I should mention that even though it has a picture of one of the new characters from the upcoming Force Awakens movie on the front of the box, Episode 7, this is actually about Return of the Jedi, so it has nothing to do with the new movies, none of the new characters, none of the new ships, no nothing. They just really wanted to make that connection somehow. But even though this game is called Risk, it really has very little to do with Risk at all. The only thing it has to do with Risk is that you have units in an adjacent sector that roll dice and try to attack, but even the attacking doesn't work quite right. Really what this is a spiritual successor to a game on the shelf behind me called Star Wars The Queen's Gambit that has long been out of print and hard to find and very expensive to get because it is full of plastic parts and it is based on Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, which nobody wants to see revitalized. But The Queen's Gambit, I know I haven't reviewed it yet, is an amazing game. And this game is sort of trying to be the successor to that one and bring about some of the same game mechanisms and some of the same feelings as that one. Is it successful? Let's take a look. Alright, let me run you through Star Wars Risk. This is a competitive game for 2 players or 4 players. Essentially, it's a 2-player game, but you can play it 4 players in 2 teams of 2 with slight adjustment. The number of order cards that you use changes, you can communicate with each other, but it's really the same game. Now, this game simulates the entire final battle sequence from Return of the Jedi. So 1 player or team of 2 players is going to be the Empire, the other player or players is going to be the Rebels, and if you're the Empire player, your goal is to destroy all of the enemy fleets, all of the Rebel fleets. You have 3 different types of fighters out here. You have Y-Wings, B-Wings, and X-Wings. There's the X-Wings, the B-Wings, and the Y-Wings. And the Millennium Falcon as well. And then you also have these fleet markers up here at the top, which have ships docked on them currently. So you need to destroy the entire enemy fleet and all of these ships in order to win if you're the Empire player. Now, if you're the Rebel player, what you need to do is destroy the Death Star. But the Death Star is protected by a shield, so you just can't attack it right at the beginning of the game. You have to knock the shields out first. Now, how this game works is that it's modular. There's these different areas of the game that you can focus on. What you do on one section, and each part of it is a different part of the battle at the end of Return of the Jedi. So there's a battle for Endor, there's a battle in space for the Death Star, there's the battle between Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader, and what you do on one board and how well you do in completing that mission is going to affect how well you can do on the other parts of the board. So you will assemble this board at the beginning of the game. This comes in 3 pieces, and there's little tokens that you use to keep track of different things like the status of the shields, and you'll have these little Stormtrooper tokens here, and then hit point tokens for the Executor, or I think it's Executor. Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker, and the Millennium Falcon have their own hit points over here on the side of the board. If any of those ever go down to 0, then they're going to be destroyed, although there's some mitigating circumstances with Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader. And then every section on the board is going to have a little small inset number with an image that will tell you which starfighters need to be there and how many of them for both the Rebels and the Empire, as well as where you should put the Executor, which is the token here, and the Millennium Falcon. And then, as I said, you're going to put the appropriate fleet tokens up at the top of the board. You also have order cards. There's going to be these blue cards for the Rebels, and then the Empire is going to get the red cards. And they functionally do the same thing, although they're going to have different types of symbols on them. The order cards are what are going to power all of your different actions during the course of the game. The cards will either be broken down into 2, or there may potentially be 3 different images on them. Let's see, there's an example of that. Each image refers to a different part of the board and lets you take a different type of action. So this one will let you activate the Millennium Falcon. This one will let you activate a squad of X-Wings. This one will activate the journey for the shield generator to destroy that. This one influences Luke Skywalker in the battle. And then the Empire cards will have the same thing, but instead they are regarding the Empire. So there will be cards to, like Force Lightning, to attack Luke Skywalker, or attacking with Darth Vader, or organizing a squad of TIE fighters, or moving the Executor. When you use one of these cards, you are only using one of the actions on here. When you flip the card over, you're going to choose which of the actions you're going to do. You can't do both or all three. It's just one or the other. Now, in turn-to-turn gameplay terms, you're going to get 6 cards at the start of the game, and you are going to first plan. You're going to take 3 of your 6 cards, and you're going to put them in the order that you would like them to resolve, with the first one being on top, then the second card that you want to resolve, and then the third, and leave them in a stack. Put your other 3 cards that are in your hand off to the side. The other player is going to be doing the same thing at the same time. Then, when you both have finished planning, the Rebel player always takes the first turn, and then you're going to go of the rounds, and then you're going to go back and forth. When it's your turn, you're going to flip the top card off of your stack. I know I'm the Empire player, but the Rebel player will go first. Then the Empire player is going to go. You'll flip the top card off the top of your stack, choose which of the 2 orders you actually want to use, and then you're going to carry it out. Then it goes back to the other player, then it comes back to me, and then I'll do the same thing over and over until everyone is out of cards. Now, it is possible, and I'll explain this in a minute, that you can get bonus cards. Whenever you get bonus cards, you're going to take the card, and you're going to, just without looking at it, take the top card off the top of your deck, put it underneath whatever orders you have remaining, if there are, and then when it gets back to you, you're able to get extra actions. In fact, the way that it would work out, if one player gets a bunch of bonus actions but the other player doesn't, then you just keep taking actions one after the other until both players are out of cards. So let me explain in a little more detail what the actual actions are that you can carry out on your turn with your order cards. And we'll start with the space battle up here, which is where the Empire has fleets of TIE fighters that will start off on the board, and there's more over here in the stock, by the way. And then you will have the Executor, and you are trying to protect the Death Star, which is very easy at the beginning because there's no way for the Rebels to actually destroy the Death Star without taking out the shield, which we'll get to in a minute. Most of the cards that have to do with the space battle have to do with moving an entire squadron of everything in a sector of the galaxy. There's little sectors delineated here. So if I use one of the TIE fighter cards, like so, then I'm going to take an entire squad of TIE fighters from one area, and I can optionally move them one space into an adjacent sector that is connected, and then I may attack. I cannot move them and attack, but either way I get to do an attack. In which case I'm going to roll as many TIE fighters as I have. I get to roll that many dice up to a maximum of 5, but you can have as many of your own troops in a sector as you want. You just can't occupy space with the enemy. And also, if you're moving a squad and you have 2 different types of ships, like let's say I have the Executor together with a squad of TIE fighters, I can't move them together. They have to move independently. And there are orders on both sides for every type of ship. They're just broken down. So specifically, Y-Wings can move for the Rebels, and the B-Wings, and the X-Wings, and the Millennium Falcon, and so on. Now, all the smaller ships only get to move one space and potentially make an attack, one sector. The Millennium Falcon and the Executor get to move up to 2 spaces. They also get to roll extra dice in combat. So, for instance, the Executor on its own gets to roll 4 dice. The Millennium Falcon on its own gets to roll 2 dice in combat. Now, I'll mention as well, to be honest, this is a little bit unclear to me in the rules. I couldn't quite find this, and I apologize, but I'm pretty sure that the different fleets kind of sort of count as sectors in the sense that you have to move those fleets off of there. They don't just happen automatically. So I could move all of my X-Wings from here to here and get them back into the fray. Now, combat in this game is very, very simple. Let's say that I'm attacking with this squad of TIE fighters into this area. I have 4 TIE fighters there. I get to roll 4 dice. I'll roll those 4 dice, and then I just apply them to the enemies that are in that sector. So actually, I'm attacking the entire sector, not just the Millennium Falcon or the X-Wings that are here. I look at my dice, see the results that I have, and then apply them. Now, every ship has a different threshold that you have to meet in order to kill it. So X-Wings and TIE fighters are actually pretty easy to kill. All you need is a 3, 4, 5, or 6. So in this case, I have 2 5s and a 6. I can just apply all 3 of those dice to the X-Wings and kill all 3 of them. And unlike the TIE fighters, those do not respawn, so it is something to note, because remember, the goal of the Empire is to kill the entire fleet and all these different ships. I can alternatively go ahead and put them on the Millennium Falcon. The Millennium Falcon is pretty hard to hit. It needs a 5 or a 6. Same thing with the Executor as well. The B-Wings are difficult to hit as well. You need a 5 or 6 for those. The Y-Wings also need a 4, 5, or 6, but the X-Wings and the TIE fighters are the easiest with a 3 to 6 necessary. Oh, I should also mention, alternatively, if you're running low on TIE fighters, and when you have the TIE fighter activation, instead of actually moving a squad and attacking with it, you can choose to just spew 4 more, which is a funny way to put it, spew 4 more TIE fighters into the sector where the Executor is. Remember, you're using the TIE fighter card to do that, but they come out in the space where the Executor is. It sounds better to say Executor, but I'll say Executor, fine. Now, let's say theoretically the shields go down on the Death Star, and we'll get to how that happens in a moment. Then, in order to win the game, with space combat, all you have to do is the Rebels have to activate one of their squads, get to within range of the Death Star, and roll however many dice they have coming to them, and get a 6. That's it. If they roll at least 1 6 with an enemy attack, they fire a photon torpedo, or that's not what it's called, just a missile, or whatever it is, down into the grate and blow up the Death Star. That's it. Now, one of the coolest things that the Empire player can do is the Death Star order. And what that is showing the power of the fully operational Death Star. You roll exactly 2 dice and pick one of the enemy fleets at the top of the board, whether it has ships on it or not. If one of those dice comes up as a 5 or 6, which by pure chance it did, you destroy that entire fleet. Boom! Gone. Actually, you will flip it over to its dark side, quote unquote. No pun intended. And that shows that it is totally dead. When you destroy all the enemy fleets, potentially, then you can start using the Death Star to target whole squads out in actual the main board, which makes it really, really easy to start whittling down the Rebel forces as the Empire. Alright, so how do those shields go down? Let's talk about the battle for Endor over here. One of the orders is a symbol that looks just like this, just like the orange Rebel symbol here. And you notice that there is a track here with little numbers. It might be kind of hard to see, but there's little numbers. Like in the beginning, it's all 2s, and it goes to, it gets a little bit tougher. It goes to 3s, 4s, and 5s on the track. You need to use the order symbol that looks like this in order to try and get the Rebel forces on Endor to get to the shield generator and take it down. And what that means, mechanically speaking, is that you're going to take all 5 of the dice, you're going to roll them, and you're going to try to meet or beat the number that you need for these spaces to move. So in the beginning, it's very easy. Like right there, I got 5 dice that are higher than 2, so are equal to or higher than 2. So I'm able to move 5 spaces on the track. Easy peasy. And as you go higher, it'll get a little more difficult, but it's really not that difficult at any point. So what the Empire player can do with their cards that have the Empire symbol is try to put roadblocks in the form of stormtroopers in their way. When you activate such an order, you're literally just going to take if there are 3 available in the stock, you're going to take those stormtroopers and you're going to put them in front, wherever that happens to be, of the Rebel marker. And what that does is increases the number that the Rebels need in order to get through those stormtroopers. So in this case, the spaces are still 2, so now they need a 3 to get through each one of them. So it just makes the threshold higher and hopefully will slow them down a bit. However, if the Rebel marker ever gets all the way to the end of the track, then that signifies the shields being shut down and the Death Star is totally vulnerable, and that probably means the Empire is going to win unless you've been doing a really good, or that the Rebels are going to win unless the Empire has been doing a really good job of killing as many of those ships as humanly possible. So that is that entire section of the board, and there's one last section to talk about. Well, as I mentioned before, these are just hit point tracks for the Executor, for Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker, and the Millennium Falcon. One thing I'm sorry, I should have been mentioning this whole time, is that when you do certain things in the game, as I mentioned before, the bonus cards, you'll be able to get bonus orders. Now, on the main Starship map, When you wipe out an entire section of all units, when you roll dice, kill an entire sector of enemies in it, you actually get to put a bonus order underneath your stack right then and there. If you take out the Millennium Falcon or the Executor, you get 2 bonus cards that you immediately get to put underneath your stack. Actually, I take that back. I think destroying the Millennium Falcon gets you 2 cards, but destroying the Executor doesn't get you any bonus cards as the Rebels, but all of the TIE fighters that are not already in play are contained on the Executor, and if those are destroyed, if the Executor is destroyed, all of those go bye-bye. So that is still incentive to destroy the Executor. Okay, sorry for the digression there. So the last part of the board that we're going to talk about is the battle between Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader, which doesn't really have anything to do with the other battles, except that if one side wins here, you can get a huge boost of cards. If Darth Vader manages to kill Luke Skywalker, then the Empire player is immediately going to get to draw 4 order cards from the top of their pile and put them underneath their stack. If Darth Vader is destroyed by the Rebel player, that player gets to draw 3 cards and put them underneath their as new orders. But if the Rebels have a third option, if they redeem Darth Vader and therefore, just like in the movie, spoiler alert, destroy both Darth Vader and the Emperor effectively, then the Rebel player gets 5 cards to put into their bonus order stack, which is crazy and really, really swings the game in favor of the Rebels. So while this may not seem like it's totally necessary to win the game, it really gives you a boost to either side. Now, there's a few different ways this is going to happen. I showed you the lightsaber orders before for both sides, Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker. If you use that order, you are going to take 4 of the dice, roll those, and any dice that come up as 4, 5, or 6 are immediately hits against the opposing Jedi. In this case, it'd be 3 hits against Darth Vader. Also, I showed you the Force Lightning. If the Empire player uses Force Lightning, that is an automatic 2 hit point damage against Luke Skywalker. The only other special order that has to do with this is this Darth Vader head here. This is the Redemption ability, and you can only play this as the Rebels if Darth Vader's hit points get down to either 3, 2, or 1, these reddened spaces here. If you play that card when he is at that amount of hit points, automatically Darth Vader is redeemed, the Emperor and Darth Vader are effectively destroyed, and you get a big honkin' stack of cards as the Rebels. And that is essentially the game. You are giving all of these orders that are influencing all the different aspects of the battle in Return of the Jedi. The fight for the shield generator on Endor, the spaceship battle of either trying to wipe out the Rebels or trying to destroy the Death Star, and also the battle between Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader. All of these different things going against each other, trying to get a leg up in one to take care and make things better in the other. And also, just as an aside, because I kind of forgot to mention, if one part of the battle is shut down, meaning that either the Rebels have already taken out the shield or one side or another has won in the battle between the Jedi, then those orders no longer apply. You just ignore those on the cards, but there's always other things that you can do. That is Star Wars Risk, quote unquote. Now, let's get to my final thoughts. So I will say up front that Star Wars Risk does not hold a candle to the original Queen's Gambit, sadly, both as far as production value and also just fun. I think that there are some important key elements of the Queen's Gambit that are much better. There's much more nuanced actions and cards, and there's also the cards the actions that you have come up less frequently, and there are more cards, so it seems like you have to have more tactical and on your feet thinking, whereas in this version of the game you can just spam the same action many times on the same round because it's so easy to get the actions that you want. And I would say that is the primary gameplay difference that hurts this game as opposed to Queen's Gambit. So where if it's much easier to set up Star Wars Risk, but if I had the time, I would always play Queen's Gambit over it. Now, I understand that Queen's Gambit is hard to find. It's very expensive. I kind of lucked into my copy by trading a bunch of stuff away for it. And even then, it's a pretty beat-up copy of it. So I know that that's not the ideal situation. So let's talk about Star Wars Risk in and of itself, compared not to Star Wars Queen's Gambit, but just on its own merits. On its own merits, it's a pretty fun game. I was actually surprised by it because the main feeling of Queen's Gambit is actually in the game, and that's what's incredible about it. That you have this big
battle going on with multiple different fronts, but really what you're doing is the same gameplay mechanism to influence all these different battles and therefore do better in one battle and influence the other battles. And that is the main core element of Queen's Gambit that carries over here, and that's why it is so much fun. But let's start back at the beginning and talk about the theme and components. The theme in this one is actually pretty strong because if you're into Star Wars at all, I presume that you are, if you're watching this or interested in the game at all, then, and you like Return of the Jedi, this really is that battle. I mean, every different part of that battle is, the end of the movie is represented here in some way, shape, or form, and there are little neat thematic elements, like the rebels having to shut down the shield to access the Death Star, and the different fleets coming in, and the Death Star shooting at the fleets, and then the battle between Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker, and how that's going back and forth, and how you can actually redeem Darth Vader and destroy the Emperor at the same time. Now, of course, it can take a twist if the Empire player actually wins the game, but that's in any game that's based off of a license. You have to take some artistic liberty with it and say that that's an alternate timeline. But other than that, I think it's pretty thematic and honors the original movie pretty well in that regard. As far as the components go, though, they're pretty awful. I mean, again, try not to compare it to Queen's Gambit because that is night and day. But even in and of itself, they're pretty bad. Annoying little tokens that are not cut that properly. The miniatures are okay for most of the ships. They're okay. I don't complain about miniatures that much. If there's miniatures at all, I'm pretty happy. And I like that they're distinct from each other. But there's no miniature for the Millennium Falcon. There's no miniature for the Executor or the Executor, whatever you want to pronounce that. Which is pretty disappointing. The board is very low quality, and you have to punch it out, which is very odd. I've never seen that before. You have to actually punch the entire board out of a bigger piece of cardboard, and then it just folds poorly. There's a big, ugly fold crease. Definitely substandard components, the kind of thing you would expect from a mass-market board gaming company, unfortunately. And also, there's no miniatures. There should be miniatures for Luke and Darth Vader. I mean, that's a whole other, by the way, back to the gameplay, a whole other strategic part of the gameplay that is missing. There's no, maneuvering around your Jedi to attack each other. It's just I deal damage, you do damage, I do damage, you do damage. Oh, I killed you. There's no miniatures battle going on there. So that's a bad thing, and it also impacts the components as well. So I can't really give any props to the presentation of the game. But as far as the gameplay goes, like I said, it's pretty interesting because, again, it's that core mechanism of just using these order cards very simply. Turns are very fast, very simple, very easy to set up. It's a very easy game to learn, and just knowing this symbol, this symbol on the card does this, affects this, deciding which element you want to go for. If you're the Rebel player, do you just want to rush to the shields as much as possible and ignore everything else, knowing that that is your real route to victory? But if you let the Empire player destroy Luke Skywalker, they get too many bonus cards, right? And too much to be ignored. And then if you're letting the Death Star take out too many of your fleets, you may find yourself in a compromising position where, or not just the Death Star, but also the Executor and the fleets of, or the waves of TIE fighters. If they take out too many of your ships as the Rebel player, then it's going to be very difficult for them to get ships close enough to the Death Star to even land the final blow, which, yes, is very easy. But getting there, if your fleet is separated and cut off, can be very difficult. And meanwhile, the Death Star is just taking pot shots at you. Once the Empire player, or the Rebel player for that matter, doesn't have to focus on one battle because it's already done, for better or for worse, things get much more dangerous and deadly in the other areas. Now, if I was going to complain about the gameplay in general, I think that the Rebel player probably has more of an edge in this one. And I actually said the opposite for Queen's Gambit. I know I haven't done a review yet. I will eventually. That I thought the Empire had too much of an edge in that game. I think in this one the edge is with the Rebel player because it is very, very easy to go through the shield track. It really is. The numbers are very low. Even taking the actions to slow them down as the Empire player, they just rip right through those stormtroopers. I don't think I forgot to mention this in the overview, but those tokens just go away. They get to use them again as the Empire player, but you're not slowing them down that much, and you're using your precious actions to do that. which there's low chance of you succeeding in slowing them down, but there's high chance of the rebels succeeding and just ripping right through, and that track is not very long. So that in and of itself means, to me, it seems like the rebels have much more of an advantage. I haven't played the game 20 times, so I don't have any statistical proof on that. That's just my impression after a few games. But other than that, and other than a lot of the nuance of the Queen's Gambit not being in this game, this I think is a worthy spiritual successor. The big selling point here is that it is fast. It's fast to set up, fast to learn, fast to play games. I mean, if you're playing with people who know the rules, know what to do, even if you're playing with teams, which works surprisingly well. In fact, one of the games that we did, our first game, was 1-on-2. I played as just the Empire, and 2 players worked together, and the only difference is I just had to have 2 hands of cards, and you play 4 orders instead. But that actually escalates the game more, and I appreciated that, because there's not too much commiserating that the players can do together. So I was surprised by how much I enjoyed this one. I think it's got some rough edges to it. There's not enough nuance and strategy, and some of the actions just come up too frequently, and there may not be quite enough to do hand in hand with that. But as just a simple, almost, light, very, very light tactical miniatures game, it succeeds pretty well and surprisingly well. And it's one of those games that just screams for you to pimp it out with better miniatures. But if you can do that, solid game. That is Star Wars Risk, or Risk Star Wars Edition from Hasbro. Check it out. You might be surprised.
Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.